I sold your car. 4 words. That's all it took to shatter what little peace I had found in the 17 days since my husband's heart stopped beating. I stood in my kitchen, still wearing the pale blue scrubs from my 12-hour shift at Denver Memorial Hospital. The phone pressed so hard against my ear that it hurt. Around me, casserole dishes from well-meaning neighbors cluttered the counter, and sympathy cards stood in a sad little row on the windowsill. The refrigerator hummed the same tune it had hummed for 26 years, the same refrigerator Bill had fixed with his own hands just 3 weeks before he collapsed in our bedroom, clutching his chest, whispering my name. "John," I said, and my voice came out strange, too thin, like it belonged to someone else. "What did you say, the Toyota mom?" My son's voice was brisk businesslike, the same tone he used when closing deals at his fancy tech company. "I sold it yesterday. Got $8,000 for it, which is pretty good for a 10-year-old car. I've already put the money into an account I set up to manage your finances. You need to be practical now that Dad's gone." I gripped the edge of the counter, my knuckles going white. The Toyota? Bill's Toyota. The car he had maintained with the same meticulous care he brought to everything, checking the oil every Sunday morning, rotating the tires exactly on schedule, teaching me how to check the brake fluid and coolant levels so no mechanic could ever take advantage of me. "But I need that car for work," I managed, trying to keep the panic from flooding my voice. "The hospital is across town, John. There's no direct bus route." His sigh crackled through the phone, heavy with impatience. "Mom, be realistic. You're 58 years old. Should you even be working at your age? Besides, the insurance and maintenance would have been too expensive for you to handle on your own." On my own. The words hit me like a slap. Bill had been gone for 17 days, and already my son was speaking to me like I was a child who couldn't tie her own shoes. Like 35 years of nursing, of managing a household, of raising him and his sister while his father worked long hours at the garage, like none of it counted for anything. "I've researched the bus routes," John continued, his voice clipping along with that terrible efficiency. "It'll take you about an hour and 20 minutes each way with one transfer. Earlier start to your day, but the exercise will be good for you. I'll text you the details. Got to run meeting in 5. The line went dead. I stood there motionless, surrounded by the sympathy casseroles and the silence that had become my constant companion since Bill's funeral. My hand trembled as I lowered the phone from my ear. Then it buzzed with a text message. I looked down at the screen. John had sent me a bus schedule complicated with multiple transfers, not the single transfer he'd mentioned. The journey would actually take closer to 2 hours each way. At the bottom, he'd added, "The exercise and fresh air will be good for you. Also, we need to schedule a time to go through Dad's tools in the garage. I can probably get a decent price for them." Bill's tools. The tools he had used for 40 years to support our family. The tools that had paid for John's college education, for Emily's braces, for the roof over our heads. The tools he had used to teach neighborhood kids basic car maintenance every summer, never charging a dime, because Bill believed that knowledge was meant to be shared. Something shifted inside me then, something that had been sleeping for a long time, buried under years of keeping the peace and making excuses for my son's increasingly selfish behavior. I walked to the spare bedroom where Bill had kept all our important documents in an old oak filing cabinet, a wedding gift from his parents 53 years ago. I pulled open the drawer labeled Automotive. Empty. My heart began to pound. I checked again, then checked the other drawers. Insurance, medical house, deed warranties, all there. But the entire automotive section had been removed. John must have taken the documents when he came by last week. He'd said he wanted to help organize Dad's paperwork. I'd been grateful at the time, too exhausted from grief and sleepless nights, to question why he needed to take anything with him. But he hadn't been helping. He'd been planning. This wasn't impulsive. This was calculated. My own son had deliberately taken the documents, sold a vehicle that wasn't his to sell, and had the audacity to frame it as helping me. I sank onto the edge of the bed, Bill's side, which still held the faint impression of his body, which I couldn't bear to disturb. His reading glasses still sat on the nightstand. His worn copy of The Old Man and the Sea still lay open to the page he'd never finish. My phone buzzed again. Another text from John. "Also, you should start thinking about selling the house. It's too big for you alone. I found a nice senior living community called Morningside Gardens. Very affordable. Senior living. I was 58 years old, not 88. I still worked full shifts at the hospital. I still mowed my own lawn and shoveled my own driveway and cooked my own meals. But to John, I had become something to be managed, a problem to be solved. an inconvenience to be minimized. I thought of Bill, then really thought of him, not just the grief that had been drowning me, but the man himself. The way he'd held my hands on our wedding day and promised to always protect me. The way he'd worked 16-hour days when John was born just to make sure we never wanted for anything. The way he'd sit in this very room every Sunday evening going through the bills with such care, always making sure we were secure. "Bill," I whispered to the empty room, "what do I do?" No answer came, of course. But as I sat there in the gathering darkness, I remembered something he'd told me once years ago when John had first started his job and begun looking down on his father's blue-collar profession. Jenny, Bill had set his calloused hand warm over mine. The day might come when you have to stand up for yourself even against people you love. And when that day comes, I need you to promise me something. Promise me you won't let anyone treat you like you don't deserve respect. I had promised, and then I had promptly forgotten because that's what I did. I smoothed things over. I made peace. I told myself that John was just ambitious, just driven, just trying to succeed in a competitive world. But selling my car without asking. Planning to sell Bill's tools. Suggesting I move into a nursing home at 58. This wasn't ambition. This was cruelty, dressed up as concern. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found a name I hadn't called in years, Margaret Sullivan. Margaret was 72 years old, a semi-retired attorney who specialized in elder rights and estate planning. More importantly, she had been Bill's best friend since high school. They'd bonded over a shared love of classic cars and justice in equal measure. If anyone would know what to do, it was Margaret. She answered on the second ring. "Jennifer, oh honey, I've been meaning to call. How are you holding up?" "Margaret," I said, and my voice cracked. "I need your help." I told her everything, the phone call, the car, the documents, John's plans for the tools and the house. As I spoke, the words tumbling out faster and faster, I heard Margaret's breathing change from sympathetic to sharp. "He did what she demanded when I finished. He sold your car without your permission, without even consulting you. He says he put the money in an account he set up for me, an account I don't have access to." "Of course you don't." Margaret's voice had gone cold and hard, the voice she used in courtrooms, the voice that had won her a reputation as someone you didn't want to cross. "Jennifer, listen to me. This isn't just inappropriate, it's illegal. The Toyota was in your name, wasn't it? Bill transferred the title to you on your 30th anniversary. I blinked. I had forgotten about that. Bill had been so casual about it at the time. "One less thing to worry about if anything happens to me," he'd said. "Yes," I said slowly. "Yes, it was. It was in my name." "Then John had no legal right to sell it. None whatsoever." Margaret paused. "Jennifer, there's something else. Something Bill asked me not to tell you unless it became necessary." A chill ran through me. "What is it?" "Bill came to see me about 3 months ago. He'd been having some chest pains." What I interrupted fresh grief and guilt crashing over me. "He never told me. He didn't want to worry you. You know how he was always protecting everyone else?" Margaret's voice softened. "The doctors had given him some warnings about his heart, and Bill wanted to make sure everything was in order, just in case." I heard her moving papers rustling in the background. "He asked me to give you something," Margaret continued. "If anything happened to him, and if John started behaving exactly the way he's behaving now." Bill knew Jennifer. He saw it coming. "Saw what coming?" "I'll be at your house in 40 minutes, Margaret said. "There are things you need to see, things Bill prepared for exactly this moment." She hung up before I could respond. I sat in the darkness of my bedroom, my husband's empty pillow beside me, and felt something I hadn't felt since he died. Hope. Bill had known. Somehow impossibly he had known what John would become, what he would try to do. And my husband, my practical, methodical, endlessly prepared husband, had made arrangements. I touched the small bruise on my left hand, still faintly visible from where Bill had gripped me in those final moments. His last words whispered through the pain. "The glove compartment, Jenny. Remember the glove compartment. I love you." At the time I thought he was delirious, confused by the heart attack. But Bill Reynolds had never been confused about anything in his life. I stood up from the bed, walked to the window, and looked out at the empty driveway where the Toyota had sat for 10 years. The concrete seemed to mock me with its barrenness. But somewhere out there was my car. And inside that car in the glove compartment, Bill had mentioned with his dying breath was something he'd left for me. Something my son had unknowingly sold along with the vehicle. Whatever it was, I was going to get it back. And then John Reynolds was going to learn that his mother was not as helpless as he believed. Margaret Sullivan arrived at my door exactly 38 minutes later, her silver hair pulled back in its usual no-nonsense bun, a worn leather portfolio tucked under one arm. At 72, she still carried herself with the fierce energy that had made her one of Denver's most respected attorneys for 4 decades. "Show me where Bill kept his files," she said without preamble, stepping past me into the house. I led her to the spare bedroom. She examined the empty automotive drawer, her lips pressing into a thin line. "Just as I suspected. John took everything he'd need to forge your signature on the title transfer." She turned to face me, her eyes sharp. "But he made a mistake, Jennifer. A big one." "What mistake?" Margaret reached into her portfolio and withdrew a sealed envelope. My name was written across the front in Bill's familiar, precise handwriting. Just seeing those letters, the careful way he'd always formed his J's, the slight slant of his E's, made my throat tighten. "Bill came to see me on March 15th, Margaret said softly, 3 weeks before his heart attack. He'd just gotten back from the cardiologist and the news wasn't good. He didn't want to worry you, but he wanted to make sure you'd be protected if the worst happened." She pressed the envelope into my hands. It felt substantial, containing more than just a letter. "He also told me something else that day," Margaret continued. "He said if John tries to take control of Jenny's life after I'm gone, give her this, and tell her to check the glove compartment of the Toyota. I've kept duplicates of everything there along with something else she'll need." The glove compartment. Bill's dying words suddenly made perfect sense. "Margaret," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, "John sold the car. Whatever Bill left in there—" "I know. That's why my first call after you hung up was to a friend at the DMV. Margaret's eyes glinted with something like triumph. "The car hasn't been re-registered yet. Whoever bought it hasn't completed the paperwork. It's still sitting in a garage in Boulder belonging to a dentist named David Patterson who purchased it as a graduation gift for his daughter." Hope flickered in my chest. "We can get it back. We're going to Boulder first thing tomorrow morning. I've already left a message with Dr. Patterson explaining the situation that a recently widowed woman's vehicle was illegally sold without her permission by a family member who exceeded his authority during a time of grief." I nodded, grateful for her tact. Even now, even after everything, some part of me still wanted to protect John from the full consequences of what he'd done. He was still my son. I had held him as a baby, watched him take his first steps, cheered at his college graduation. How had that bright-eyed little boy become this? "Now," Margaret said gently, guiding me to sit on the edge of the bed, "I think you should read what Bill wanted you to know." With trembling fingers, I opened the envelope. Inside was a letter several pages long and a small brass key. "My dearest Jenny, if you're reading this, 2 things have happened. I'm no longer with you, and John has started making decisions he has no right to make. I've known for some time that our son has developed values very different from ours. While we raised him to respect people regardless of their wealth or status, he's chosen to measure worth only in dollars and appearances. I've watched him look at me with something like shame in his eyes when his fancy friends are around, as if having a mechanic for a father is something to be embarrassed about. I've prepared for this possibility, Jenny. The key enclosed opens safe deposit box number 247 at First National Bank on Broadway. Inside, you'll find everything you need to understand what I've been building for us over the past 30 years. But there's something even more important in the Toyota's glove compartment. Something John must never find. It contains proof of everything, plus documents you'll need to take to Margaret immediately. I'm sorry I kept secrets from you, my love. I wanted to protect you from worrying, and I wanted to be sure everything was perfectly in place before I shared it all. I thought I had more time. Know that every decision I made was out of love for you, and hope that John will eventually become the man we raised him to be, not the man he currently is. All my love always, Bill." I read the letter 3 times, trying to understand. What had Bill been building? "What secrets, Margaret?" I said, looking up at her with tear-blurred vision. "Do you know what he's talking about?" She sat down beside me, taking my hands in hers. "I helped him set everything up legally, Jennifer. He swore me to secrecy until you needed to know." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Your husband was a remarkable man, far more remarkable than anyone, including John, ever realized." "What do you mean?" "Let's get that car back first," Margaret said. "Then you'll understand everything." The drive to Boulder the next morning felt surreal. Margaret insisted on driving, and I was grateful my hands wouldn't stop shaking. The Rocky Mountains rose before us, their peaks still dusted with spring snow, achingly beautiful against the clear blue sky. "Did Bill ever mention investments to you?" Margaret asked as we left Denver's suburbs behind. "Not really," I admitted. "He had his pension from the garage and we had some modest savings. He always handled our finances. I trusted him." I felt a flush of embarrassment at this admission. How little I'd paid attention to our financial matters, content to let Bill manage everything while I focused on my nursing career and keeping our household running. "Don't be ashamed of that," Margaret said as if reading my thoughts. "Bill wanted to handle things. It was his way of showing love, protecting you from worry, making sure you never had to stress about money." We pulled up to an impressive house in one of Boulder's established neighborhoods. Dr. David Patterson was waiting in the driveway, a tall man in his 60s with kind eyes and a concerned expression. Beside him stood a young woman who must be his daughter, looking uncomfortable in the morning sunlight. "Mrs. Reynolds." Dr. Patterson extended his hand as I stepped out of the car. "I'm so terribly sorry about this situation. Had I known the circumstances of the sale, I never would have purchased the vehicle." "Thank you for understanding," I replied, shaking his hand. "I hope this hasn't caused too much inconvenience." "Not at all," he assured me, though his daughter's expression suggested otherwise. Amber was excited about the car, but clearly this takes precedence. "I've brought documentation confirming Mrs. Reynolds' legal ownership," Margaret interjected all business as she handed him a folder. "Along with a cashier's check for the full amount you paid." Dr. Patterson glanced at the paperwork, then shook his head. "Keep your money, Mrs. Reynolds. This was an illegal sale. I couldn't in good conscience profit from it." "Dad," his daughter protested, but fell silent at his look. "I lost my wife 3 years ago," he said quietly, meeting my eyes. "I understand how vulnerable that time can be, how people sometimes try to take advantage." He paused. "Consider this my small way of setting things right." His unexpected kindness brought tears to my eyes. "Thank you," I managed. "The car's in the garage. Everything should be exactly as it was when I bought it." He handed me the keys. I noticed it was meticulously maintained. Whoever took care of it clearly knew what they were doing. "My husband," I said softly. "He was a mechanic." We completed the paperwork quickly. Margaret had prepared everything in advance, and then I was sliding into the driver's seat of the Toyota for the first time since Bill's death. The smell hit me immediately. Bill's aftershave, faint but unmistakable, still lingering in the fabric of the seats. The pine air freshener he'd always insisted on hanging from the rearview mirror. A faded photo of our family tucked into the sun visor, John and Emily as teenagers, Bill and me, young and hopeful, all of us smiling at the camera. I gripped the steering wheel and finally allowed myself to cry. Not the polite, restrained tears I'd shed at the funeral, surrounded by mourners and obligations. Real tears, ugly tears. The kind that came from somewhere deep inside, carrying with them all the grief I'd been holding back for 17 days. Margaret stood outside, giving me privacy, and I loved her for it. When the tears finally subsided, I wiped my face with the back of my hand and looked at the glove compartment. Bill's last words. The letter's instructions. Whatever he'd hidden in there, it was time to find out. I pressed the button. The compartment opened smoothly, revealing several neatly organized items, the car's manual registration documents, and a thick manila envelope with the words, "For Jenny Urgent," written across it in Bill's handwriting. My hands trembled as I picked it up. It was heavier than I expected. I glanced at Margaret, who had moved to stand beside my open door. "Should I hesitated, nodding toward the road. "There's a scenic overlook about 5 minutes from here," she said. "Somewhere you can read it without interruption." The overlook offered a stunning view of the mountains. I parked the car and sat there for a long moment, just holding the envelope, trying to prepare myself for whatever was inside. Finally, I opened it. Inside was a USB drive, a letter even longer than the first one, and a thick stack of legal documents covered in small print and official stamps. I unfolded the letter first. "Jenny, if you've found this, it means you've gotten the car back from whoever John sold it to. Good. I knew you had more fight in you than he gives you credit for. What I'm about to tell you is going to be hard to believe. I've kept this secret for 30 years, not because I didn't trust you, but because I wanted everything to be perfect before I revealed it. I wanted to take you to Italy, to the art museums you've always dreamed of visiting, and tell you they're surrounded by beauty, what our future would look like. I didn't get that chance. So you'll have to settle for this letter in a glove compartment. Jenny, I'm not just a mechanic. I mean, I am. It's honest work, and I'm proud of every car I've ever fixed. But for the past 30 years, I've also been quietly investing in real estate throughout Denver. It started small. In 1994, I used my first big bonus from the shop to buy a tiny rental house on Oak Street for $42,000. I fixed it up myself nights and weekends while you thought I was helping friends with their cars, and started renting it out. Then I bought another. And another. The money kept getting reinvested. Every time a property gained value, I used the equity to buy more. I learned everything I could about real estate, about markets, about building wealth slowly and carefully. The USB drive contains complete records of everything. But here's the short version. The portfolio currently includes 17 residential properties and 4 commercial buildings spread across Denver, including, and I need you to sit down for this one, Jenny, the Aspen Heights luxury apartment complex. Yes, that Aspen Heights. The one where John has been living for the past 2 years, paying $2,800 a month in rent and bragging to everyone about his exclusive address. Our son has been paying rent to his mother for 24 months without having any idea. Everything is held by a company called Reynolds Family Holdings, LLC. The company is registered solely in your name, Jenny. You've been the legal owner all along. I just manage the day-to-day operations. Total portfolio value as of last month, approximately $4.7 million. Monthly income after expenses and management fees, $78,000. I know this is a lot to take in. I know you're probably angry that I kept this from you. But I had my reasons. I saw what John was becoming. The way he looked at me with embarrassment when his rich friends came around. The way he started measuring everything, including people, by their bank accounts. I knew that if he found out about the properties, he'd try to get his hands on them. He'd pressure you. He'd manipulate you. He'd use every trick in his salesman's playbook to convince you that he should be managing everything. I couldn't let that happen, so I kept it secret, and I put everything in your name where he can't touch it. The management company is called Reliable Properties. Ask for Amanda Brooks. She's been handling the day-to-day for me for 15 years, and she's expecting your call. Password for the USB drive is Jenny1966 Reynolds. There's one more thing. Inside the safe deposit box at the bank, you'll find my journal. I've been keeping it for years, writing down my thoughts about our life, our children, my hopes for the future. There are things in there I never had the courage to say out loud. Things about John, about what I saw happening to him, about why I made the choices I made. I love you, Jenny. I've loved you since the day I first saw you at that church picnic wearing a yellow dress and laughing at something your friend said. I loved you through 30 years of marriage, through raising 2 children, through every ordinary day and extraordinary moment. I just wanted to give you choices, Jenny. Financial freedom, independence, the ability to live exactly as you want without worrying about money or depending on anyone, including our son. Please don't be too hard on John. I still believe the good person we raised is in there somewhere. Maybe he just needs to learn some hard lessons about what really matters in life. All my love across whatever distance separates us now. Bill P.S. The rent John pays every month. It's been going into a separate account in his name. He doesn't know it exists. I set it up years ago, hoping that someday he'd grow up enough to deserve it. Consider it his inheritance when and if you decide he's ready. I don't know how long I sat there staring at the letter, reading and rereading certain passages until the words blurred together. $4.7 million. 17 residential properties. Aspen Heights, John's building. My husband, my quiet, humble, hard-working husband, had built an empire. And he'd done it without ever saying a word, without ever asking for recognition, without ever changing the modest, careful way we lived our lives. While I'd been clipping coupons and shopping sales, Bill had been quietly amassing a fortune. While John had been looking down on his father's blue-collar job, he'd been paying rent to his own mother. The irony was almost too perfect to be real. Margaret appeared at my window, concern evident on her face. "Jennifer, are you all right?" I handed her the letter without speaking. Watched her eyes widen as she read. Heard her soft intake of breath when she reached the part about Aspen Heights. "That magnificent bastard," she murmured, and despite everything I laughed. It was the first time I'd laughed since Bill died. The offices of Reliable Properties occupied the top floor of a sleek building downtown. Amanda Brooks met me at the elevator, a professional woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and an efficient manner. "Mrs. Reynolds," she said warmly, shaking my hand. "Bill talked about you all the time. He was so proud of you, 35 years of nursing, he'd say. And she still puts on those scrubs every single day because she actually cares about helping people." My throat tightened. Even in business contexts, Bill had been bragging about me, celebrating me. While I'd had no idea what he was building, he'd never forgotten what I was doing. Amanda spent the next 2 hours walking me through everything. Property by property, building by building, year by year, the story of how Bill Reynolds, son of a factory worker and a seamstress, had transformed a $42,000 investment into a multi-million-dollar portfolio. He was incredibly shrewd, Amanda explained. He understood that real estate is really just like mechanical work. You find what's broken, you fix it. You make it run better than before. He'd buy properties that others overlooked, renovate them himself, and hold on to them for the long term. She pulled up Aspen Heights on her computer screen. 32 luxury units, 98% occupancy premium rents that attracted young professionals and executives. "Unit 14B, I said quietly. "That's my son." Amanda nodded carefully. "Yes, Mr. Reynolds, your husband was very specific about how we should handle that situation. Your son pays market rate, receives no special treatment, and has no idea about the ownership structure." She paused. "I should also tell you that there have been issues." "What kind of issues?" "Noise complaints from neighbors, disputes with building staff about parking and amenities, a general attitude that the rules don't apply to him because of his perceived importance." Amanda's expression remained neutral, professional. "Nothing that violates his lease outright, but the building manager Raj Patel has documented everything. My son who thought his mother needed to take the bus because she couldn't afford car insurance, who wanted to sell his father's tools for a few $1,000s, who was planning to put me in a nursing home, and all this time he'd been paying rent to me. There's one more thing," Amanda said. She opened a drawer and pulled out a small velvet box. "Bill left this with me about a month before he passed. He said if anything happened to him, I should give it to you at our first meeting." I opened the box with trembling hands. Inside was a delicate gold necklace with a pendant in the shape of a key studded with small diamonds that caught the light. A note lay folded beneath it in Bill's handwriting. "You've always held the key to my heart. Now you hold the keys to our future. Use them wisely, my love." I fastened the necklace around my neck, feeling the cool weight of the pendant settle against my chest. "What would you like to do now?" Amanda asked gently. I thought about John, about his smug certainty that he knew what was best for everyone, about the way he'd sold my car and planned to sell Bill's tools and tried to ship me off to a nursing home, all while believing his mother was too poor and helpless to manage her own life. I could tell him right now. Call him up, reveal everything, watch his worldview crumble. But what would that accomplish? He'd change his behavior because I was rich, not because he respected me. He'd suddenly become attentive and caring because there was money at stake, not because he'd actually learned anything. That wasn't what Bill wanted, and it wasn't what I wanted either. "I'm going to need some time to think," I said finally. "But for now, I'd like you to proceed with something. A building-wide inspection of Aspen Heights, every unit including 14B, standard protocol for a change in ownership oversight." Amanda's professional mask slipped just slightly, revealing a hint of a smile. "Of course, Mrs. Reynolds. Raj Patel will be very thorough." "I'm sure he will." I stood straightening my shoulders. "And Amanda, my son, is to be treated exactly like every other tenant. No better, no worse. Just equal." "Understood." As I left Reliable Properties that afternoon, the gold key pendant warm against my skin, I felt something I hadn't experienced in a long time. Power. Not the kind that came from money, though. I apparently had plenty of that now, but the power that came from knowledge, from having choices, from standing on solid ground. Bill had given me this. Not just wealth, but the ability to handle whatever came next on my own terms. My phone buzzed with a text from John checking in. "Hope you're being practical about the living situation. I've scheduled a tour of Morningside Gardens for this weekend." I smiled as I typed my reply. "I'm doing fine. Actually, I'd like to have dinner at your place tomorrow night. We should talk." His response came quickly. "Sure, 7 p.m. I'll order something nice. We can discuss your finances and the house." "Yes," I thought, slipping the phone back into my purse. We certainly have a lot to discuss, but not in the way you're expecting, John. Not in the way you're expecting at all. John's apartment was exactly what I expected: sleek, expensive, and utterly soulless. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased downtown Denver's glittering skyline. Designer furniture arranged more for appearance than comfort filled the open living space. A glass case displayed a collection of luxury watches. Framed photographs showed John posing with minor celebrities at charity galas, his smile identical in every shot, practiced, polished empty. "Mom, right on time." He air-kissed my cheek as I entered, dressed in what I recognized as premium athleisure wear, the kind advertised in glossy magazines for people who wanted to look casually wealthy, even while relaxing. I glanced around the space, seeing it differently now. Every square foot of this apartment belonged to me. The marble countertops, the hardwood floors, the view John bragged about to anyone who would listen, all of it existed because my husband had the vision and discipline to build something extraordinary, while people like our son looked down on him. "I ordered from Bellini's," John said, gesturing toward containers of expensive Italian food arranged on the dining table. "Hope you like it." Bill had always cooked our meals from scratch. He believed food made with personal effort carried more meaning than anything purchased. But I simply nodded and took my seat. John poured wine into crystal glasses and launched into his agenda before I'd even unfolded my napkin. "So I've been running the numbers on the house," he began. "Given the current market, we could probably get $450, maybe $475 if we stage it properly. After closing costs and paying off the remaining mortgage, that should leave you with enough to cover Morningside Gardens' entrance fee and about 5 years of monthly expenses." "And after 5 years," he waved dismissively, "we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. The important thing is getting you into a managed environment where you don't have to worry about maintenance bills, transportation." "You mean an environment where you don't have to worry about me?" John blinked, caught off guard by my directness. This wasn't how our conversations usually went. I was supposed to nod along, ask questions, eventually agree to whatever he'd decided. "Mom, I'm trying to help you. By selling my car without permission, by planning to auction your father's tools, by picking out a nursing home for a 58-year-old woman who works full-time and manages her own household." "Someone had to take charge," he said, an edge creeping into his voice. "Dad always handled everything. You don't know the first thing about finances or Mom. What I know," I interrupted quietly, "is that your father trusted me. He respected me. He never once made a decision about our life without discussing it with me first." John's jaw tightened. Dad was old-fashioned. He didn't understand how the world works now. "And how does it work?" John enlightened me. He leaned back, adopting the patient, slightly condescending tone he probably used with difficult clients. "It's about efficiency, Mom, about optimizing resources. You're sitting on a depreciating asset, the house, while hemorrhaging money on utilities, maintenance, property taxes. Meanwhile, your income is limited to a nurse's salary, which frankly isn't sustainable at your age. The logical move is to liquidate, consolidate, and transition into a managed care situation." Managed care situation. He made it sound like a business merger, not shipping his mother off to spend her remaining years playing bingo with strangers. "Your father would be disappointed in you," I said. John's face flushed. "Dad would want me to take care of you." "No, he'd want you to treat me like a human being worthy of making her own choices. Not a problem to be optimized." I stood from the table, my pasta barely touched. "Mom, sit down. You're being emotional." "I'm being clear," I corrected, "which is apparently something you're not used to from me." I pulled the spare keys from my purse, the ones he'd taken without asking, and set them on the table. "I've changed the locks and the security code. From now on, you call before you visit." This is ridiculous. What's ridiculous is a grown man selling his mother's car and thinking she should be grateful. I met his eyes steadily. "Your father taught you better than this, John. I don't know what happened to that boy who used to help him in the garage, who cried when we had to put the dog down, who wrote me a poem for Mother's Day when he was 12. But this person you've become, your father saw it happening, and it broke his heart." Something flickered across John's face, surprise maybe, or the faintest shadow of shame. But it vanished quickly, replaced by defensive anger. "You don't know what you're talking about." "I know more than you think." I picked up my purse. "Thank you for dinner. We'll talk again when you're ready to have an actual conversation instead of a management meeting." I left him standing in his expensive apartment, surrounded by his luxury watches and his celebrity photographs, and his carefully curated image of success. and I felt for the first time in years like myself. The building inspection happened 3 days later. Raj Patel was thorough professional and completely impartial, exactly as I'd requested. He found 3 violations in Unit 14B, an unauthorized smart thermostat that interfered with the building's HVAC system, multiple documented noise complaints, and a $12,000 mountain bike stored illegally in the fire exit stairwell. John called me in a fury that evening. "Can you believe this? They're citing me for code violations. Me, I've been a perfect tenant for 2 years, and suddenly they're treating me like a criminal." "Did you commit the violations?" "That's not the point. The point is that someone's targeting me. I'm going to call their corporate office. I know people." "John," I said calmly, "did you install an unauthorized thermostat?" Silence. "Did neighbors complain about noise from your apartment?" More silence. "Is your bike in the stairwell?" "It's a $12,000 bike, Mom. I'm not leaving it in the common storage area where anyone could." "Then you committed the violations, and you're being treated exactly like any other tenant would be." I paused. "Maybe that's the problem. You're not used to being treated like everyone else." He hung up without saying goodbye. A week later, he received notice that his rent would increase by 30% upon lease renewal, an adjustment to match current market rates. The letter explained that ownership had reviewed all units and was implementing fair, consistent pricing across the building. This time, John didn't call. He showed up at my door. "Something's going on," he said, pushing past me into the living room. "First the inspection, now this rent increase. Someone's targeting me specifically. I can feel it." "Or maybe," I suggested, "you're just experiencing what everyone else experiences. Rules that apply equally. Prices that reflect fair market value. No special treatment because of who you think you are." He stared at me like I was speaking a foreign language. "I want to show you something," I said. "In the garage." Bill's workshop stood exactly as he'd left it. Tools arranged with military precision on pegboard walls. Half-finished projects on the workbench. The small TV in the corner where he'd watch baseball games while working on particularly stubborn repairs. The smell of motor oil and metal and sawdust. The smell of honest work, of creation, of care. John hesitated at the doorway, clearly uncomfortable. He hadn't set foot in here since high school, since he'd decided that his father's profession was something to be ashamed of. "Do you remember this?" I picked up a well-worn wrench from the wall. The handle was smooth from decades of use, but near the base, carved roughly into the metal, were 2 letters, J.R. John's initials. He'd scratched them there himself when he was 10 years old, the first time Bill let him help with a real repair job. He'd been so proud, beaming up at his father, asking 1,000 questions, wanting to learn everything. John's voice caught. "I forgot about that." "Your father never forgot. He used this wrench every single day right up until the end." I set it back on the wall in the exact spot Bill had always kept it. He kept it where he could see it while he worked. A reminder of the son he loved. I walked to the workbench and picked up a leather-bound journal I'd placed there earlier, the one from Bill's safe deposit box. "There's something you need to hear," I said. "Something your father wrote." I opened to a marked page and began to read aloud. November 15th, 2010. Today, John brought his girlfriend home from college. I was under the Hendersons' car when they arrived, oil change, nothing complicated, but I came out to say hello. I saw the look on his face when she noticed my clothes, my hands, the grease under my fingernails. I saw the shame. John had gone very still. After she made a comment about mechanics, I heard John laugh. He said, "Oh, that's just someone who helps out around here." As if I were the hired help. As if 30 years of providing for this family was something to be embarrassed about. I looked up at my son. His face had drained of color. "Keep reading," he whispered. My heart broke a little today. Not because John was ashamed of me, I can handle that, but because I realized we'd failed somewhere along the way. His mother and I raised him to judge people by their character, not their profession. Somewhere we lost him. He started measuring worth in dollars and titles and impressive addresses. I turned the page. But I won't give up on him. I still believe the good person we raised is in there somewhere. Maybe he needs to learn some hard lessons first. So I've made a decision. I'm going to build something for Jenny, a safety net that John can never control or take from her. And maybe someday when he's finally ready to see clearly, he'll understand what really matters. I closed the journal. Your father spent the next 13 years building a real estate portfolio worth $4.7 million. He did it quietly, without recognition, without ever changing how we lived. And he put every single asset in my name, not because he wanted to hide it from you, but because he wanted to protect me from what you might become. John sank onto Bill's old shop stool, the weight of revelation crushing down on him. 4.7, including Aspen Heights. I let that sink in. You've been paying rent to me for 2 years, John. Your father arranged it that way because he knew exactly what you'd do if you found out. Try to control it, manage it, leverage it for yourself. So he made sure you couldn't. The inspection, John said slowly. The rent increase. Standard procedures that apply to everyone equally. You just never experienced equal before. You always expected special treatment and usually got it. I sat down across from him. But here's what your father wanted you to understand. The value of his life had nothing to do with his bank account. He could have lived in a mansion, driven luxury cars, joined country clubs. Instead, he changed oil and fixed transmissions and taught neighborhood kids how engines work, because that's what gave his life meaning. John reached out and touched the wrench with his initials, a tentative gesture like reconnecting with a ghost. I remember that day, he murmured. Carving my initials. I was so excited. I told everyone at school that my dad was teaching me to be a mechanic. What happened to that boy? His eyes glistened. I don't know. Somewhere along the way, people made me feel like it wasn't enough, like he wasn't enough, so I decided I'd be more. More isn't always better, John. Sometimes more is just empty. He picked up the wrench and held it against his chest, the way a child holds a beloved toy. When the tears came, they were quiet, not dramatic or performative, but genuine. The first real tears he'd shed since his father died. Not for the money, not for being deceived. For the father he'd lost twice, once to death, and once years earlier to his own misplaced shame. The kitchen smelled like coffee and Bacon Bill's Sunday morning tradition, now carried on by an unlikely successor. Eggs are almost ready, John called over his shoulder. He'd moved out of Aspen Heights into a modest apartment across town. He spent his weekends in Bill's garage, now learning to use the tools he'd once wanted to sell, finding a kind of peace among the wrenches and socket sets. I sat at the table, touching the key pendant at my throat, watching my son cook breakfast with the same careful attention his father had always shown. Mom, he said, sliding a plate in front of me. I want to say something. You don't have to. I need to. He sat across from me, his expensive watch notably absent from his wrist. I'm sorry, not just for the car or the tools or trying to put you in a home. I'm sorry for the last 15 years, for being ashamed of Dad, for measuring everything by the wrong standards. Your father always believed you'd find your way back. I know. John glanced toward the living room where Bill's photograph still hung on the wall, the same crooked smile, the same kind eyes. That's the part that kills me. He never gave up on me, even when I gave up on everything he stood for. I reached across the table and squeezed his hand. The question now is, what are you going to do with that knowledge? John was quiet for a moment. Then, I talked to Emily last night. She's naming the baby Williamina after Dad. I heard. She invited me to visit when the baby comes. Actually visit, not just send an expensive gift. He smiled a real smile, nothing like the practiced one from his charity gala photos. I think I might learn to change diapers. Get my hands dirty for once. Through the kitchen window, morning light fell across Bill's garage, illuminating the space where he'd spent so many hours building, fixing, creating. Your father would be proud, I said. I hope so. John lifted his coffee cup in a small salute toward Bill's photograph. I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to deserve that. On the wall, Bill Reynolds smiled his crooked smile, frozen forever in a moment of joy. And somehow, despite everything I knew, he was still with us, still protecting, still believing in the family he'd loved with every beat of his quiet, generous heart. The inheritance he left us wasn't just money, it was truth. And finally, after all these years, we were ready to receive it.